From cell to celebrity. The inmate who became a legend. Before we dive into this one, make sure you've hit that subscribe button, because once you hear how this man turned a prison sentence into a worldwide legend, you won't believe what happens next. Welcome to the darkness. Let's begin. Blood on the pavement. Chicago, 1995. The sirens were already howling when the first body hit the street. A black Cadillac riddled with bullets rolled to a stop outside a corner store on 79th and Halsted. Inside, a man slumped against the leather seat, gold chain torn, cell phone still buzzing in his pocket. His name was Darnell Smoke Carter, a street enforcer, feared untouchable, until tonight. Detective Marcus Heller crouched beside the car, the faint smell of gunpowder still clinging to the air. 3 shell casings on the ground, one embedded in the windshield. It wasn't random. It was a message. And everyone in Chicago's South Side knew who it was meant for. Leon King Mercer. Mercer wasn't just another gang leader. He was the architect, a man who built an empire out of loyalty, fear, and profit. From the outside, he was a ghost, clean record, legitimate businesses, smiling in newspaper photos beside community leaders. But behind the scenes, he was the man who decided which corners thrived, which fell, and who disappeared when debts weren't paid. That night, police stormed his operation. They found guns, cash, and enough cocaine to bury a city block. Mercer was arrested at dawn, calm, composed, wearing a tailored suit and a smirk. As they cuffed him, he whispered to the lead officer, "You can lock me up, but you can't shut me down." The media went wild. "The King falls," read the headlines. To the public, he was a villain, ruthless, manipulative, dangerous. But to many inside the neighborhoods he controlled, Mercer was something else, a provider. He'd paid rent for struggling families, kept gangs from spilling violence into schools, even funded church renovations. His arrest left a power vacuum, and the streets began to bleed. Inside Cook County Jail, Mercer adjusted quickly. He wasn't the biggest man there, but he had something stronger, control. Within weeks, he had guards taking orders and inmates pledging allegiance. Cigarettes became currency. Favors turned into power. The prison had rules, but Mercer had his own. "Respect," he said once during an interview years later, "is the only thing that walks through walls." As his trial dragged on, something strange happened. Journalists began to show interest. Not just crime reporters, sociologists, documentarians, even human rights activists. They wanted to understand how one man could hold such influence behind bars. Mercer gave them answers, carefully crafted ones. He spoke about poverty, survival, and the system that built him. His interviews were magnetic, articulate, and brutally honest. For the first time, the public didn't just see a gangster. They saw a man shaped by the streets, now using his mind instead of muscle. When the verdict came, life without parole, he nodded calmly. "That's not the end," he told his lawyer. "That's the beginning of the story." Within a year, letters started flooding in. Supporters, admirers, even college students writing theses about him. His words were being shared online, quoted in songs, printed on T-shirts. The man who once ruled corners was now ruling culture. But Detective Heller didn't buy the redemption story. He'd seen the look in Mercer's eyes the night of the arrest, cold, calculating. And when a rival gang leader was found stabbed in a federal prison across the state, Heller couldn't ignore the whispers. Mercer had ordered it from solitary confinement. Still, the public saw only the legend, the man who turned his life around. And Mercer played the part perfectly, writing essays, giving prison interviews, preaching reform. Every camera made him stronger. Every article made him more famous. But behind the polished words and quiet charisma, something darker was moving. The power Mercer once held on the streets was morphing into something far more dangerous, invisible, intelligent, and unstoppable. And when an anonymous message landed on Detective Heller's desk one night, a single sentence scrawled in red ink, the illusion began to crack. It read, "The king still rules. The kingdom behind bars." In the months after his sentencing, Leon King Mercer's legend grew louder than the iron doors that closed behind him. Federal penitentiary walls were supposed to erase a man like him, strip away power, pride, and voice. Instead, they amplified him. Every inmate knew his name before he arrived, and by the time he stepped off the prison bus at Marion, he was greeted like a head of state. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. Mercer ruled through silence. A nod here, a glance there, that was enough. Within weeks, the gambling rackets, the kitchen hustle, the contraband trades, all funneled through him. Even the warden noticed. "I don't run this place," one guard whispered. "He does." But Mercer wasn't after cigarettes or cash anymore. He wanted influence. He began reading psychology, politics, Malcolm X, Mandela. In the evenings, his cell transformed into a classroom. Inmates gathered in the dim yellow light while he spoke about systems, oppression, and control. They called it the Circle. It wasn't a gang, at least not by name. It was an ideology. "You can chain a man's body," Mercer told them, "but you'll never chain his story." Outside, his words leaked. Someone smuggled out his handwritten notes, speeches, essays, reflections. They hit the internet, shared by activists and rappers alike. Soon, he had an audience he'd never met. College students quoting him in debates, celebrities referencing him in interviews. The media called him the Philosopher King. Detective Marcus Heller watched this transformation from his cluttered office, late-night coffee steaming beside stacks of case files. Every time Mercer's name trended online, it felt like a personal failure. "We buried him alive," Heller muttered, "and somehow he's still breathing." He couldn't shake the feeling that Mercer was using the system to rebuild what he'd lost, one word, one follower at a time. Then came the news that chilled him. A journalist, Rachel Devlin, had secured a one-on-one interview with Mercer inside Marion. She was young, ambitious, and believed in redemption. Her producers warned her, "Don't fall for the charm." But when she sat across from him, recording device between them, Mercer didn't need charm. He had truth, or something that sounded like it. He spoke about his childhood, the poverty, the gang recruiters, the nights he went hungry. He admitted his crimes, but framed them as survival. "I'm not proud," he said softly, "but I'm not sorry for trying to live." When the interview aired, it exploded. Ratings broke records. To the world, Mercer wasn't a villain anymore. He was a symbol. But Heller saw something else, a calculated campaign. Mercer's old lieutenants were suddenly being released early, their names surfacing in unrelated plea deals. Former associates were investing in community organizations that suspiciously matched Mercer's language. Behind bars, he was creating an empire of influence, legal, public, untraceable. Then, one night, a riot broke out in Marion. 3 inmates dead, 2 guards injured. Officially, it was a turf war. Unofficially, it was something else entirely. When order was restored, investigators found a message carved into the wall of cell block C. "The king reigns in silence." Heller drove down to Marion himself, flashing his badge through layers of security until he stood outside Mercer's cell. Inside, the man sat cross-legged, reading a philosophy book, eyes calm, lips curved into a faint smile. "Still chasing ghosts, detective?" Mercer asked without looking up. "I'm chasing you," Heller replied. "You can't run a kingdom from a cage." Mercer closed the book and finally met his gaze. "You think a cage keeps a king from his throne?" Heller stared at him for a long moment, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. He'd come to intimidate Mercer, but left with a sinking realization. The prison wasn't containing him. It was protecting him. And whatever Mercer was planning, it was already in motion beyond these walls. 2 days later, Rachel Devlin, the journalist who'd interviewed Mercer, vanished on her drive back from a follow-up shoot. Her car was found abandoned by the river. The engine still warm. Her camera bag missing. No signs of struggle, just a note on the dashboard. In Mercer's handwriting, it read, "Truth demands sacrifice." The King's last broadcast. The morning after Rachel Devlin's disappearance, the city woke to headlines that felt like déjà vu. A woman missing, no witnesses, no suspects, just questions. Detective Marcus Heller hadn't slept in 30 hours. The same dread he'd felt when Smoke Carter's body was found years ago came flooding back. Except this time, it wasn't about territory or drugs. It was about a message, one Mercer had been writing in blood and silence all along. By noon, Mercer's name was everywhere again. Talk shows debated whether the journalist had been silenced for uncovering too much or if it was all an elaborate hoax. Protesters gathered outside the Department of Corrections demanding answers. Online, #FreeTheKing trended beside #JusticeForRachel. The lines between villain and visionary blurred beyond recognition. Inside Marion, something was brewing. The warden ordered a full lockdown, but it was too late. At 8:47 a.m., the prison's internal communication network flickered to black. Every monitor across the facility, from guard stations to cafeteria TVs, lit up with a single image. Leon Mercer sitting in his cell, staring straight into the camera. He shouldn't have had access to that feed. Yet there he was, calm, deliberate, in total control. "Good morning, America," he began. His voice was steady, magnetic. "They said this place was built to silence me. But silence," he smiled faintly, "is only the space before truth is heard." He spoke about corruption, the private prison industry, the billions made off human misery. He talked about reform and control, but the words didn't sound like redemption anymore. They sounded like a manifesto. He ended with a chilling promise. "The system made me a criminal. Now I'll make the system confess." Then the feed cut out. Heller arrived at Marion hours later. Chaos. Guards scrambling, administrators shouting, news vans lining the road. Somehow, Mercer had hijacked the broadcast not only inside the prison, but across multiple state channels. Millions had seen it. His followers flooded social media, quoting his speech like scripture. Someone had turned his words into a music video within hours. The legend was alive and growing. Heller pushed through the crowd and demanded to see Mercer. But when they opened the cell door, it was empty. Bed neatly made. No sign of struggle. The surveillance cameras inside the unit had been wiped clean. Only one clue remained, etched into the concrete wall above the cot. It read, "Truth walks free." The prison went into full emergency lockdown. Helicopters swept the skies. Highway patrols set up roadblocks. But the truth was, Mercer hadn't escaped the way they thought. He'd walked out legally, hidden behind layers of digital manipulation, legal confusion, and forged paperwork. Someone on the inside had switched his file with another inmate scheduled for transfer to a minimum security facility. By the time anyone noticed, Mercer was gone, and Rachel Devlin's camera bag was found floating downriver, containing a flash drive with her final interview notes. The files revealed the truth no one wanted to see. Rachel had uncovered connections between Mercer's so-called community foundations and legitimate corporations funneling money into his prison empire. He'd turned rehabilitation into a business, one that stretched from Chicago streets to political donors in D.C. Rachel had confronted him during her last visit. The footage cut off mid-sentence, her voice trembling. "So all of this, the speeches, the reform, it's just another hustle?" And Mercer's final words on camera, "No, Ms. Devlin. It's evolution." Weeks later, Heller received a plain envelope at his home. No return address. Inside was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance. Mercer, sitting on a beach somewhere tropical, sunglasses on, reading a book titled The Art of Power. On the back of the photo, a message written in black ink, "Legends don't die in cages." The case was officially closed. Rachel's death ruled unresolved. Mercer declared presumed dead. But Heller knew better. Every time he saw a protester holding a sign with Mercer's quotes or a new foundation launching under Mercer's ideology, he felt that same chill. The king hadn't escaped prison. He had escaped into history. And as the screen fades to black, the last echo of Mercer's voice flingers like smoke. You don't need freedom to rule. You just need believers. If you thought Leon Mercer's rise was chilling, wait until you hear about the killer who turned an entire town into his jury. Hit subscribe. The next story might just be true.